The twin suns of Nexus 7 rose slowly over the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. Zarthax, the last surviving member of the once great Nexian race, stood at the entrance of his underground home. His large, sad eyes scanned the empty plains before him. Zarthax was different from the other powerful races that ruled the galaxy. He was small, barely reaching the height of an average human child. His skin was pale blue, almost translucent, revealing the delicate network of veins beneath. 4 slender arms hung at his sides, ending in hands with 6 long, nimble fingers each. But it was his head that truly set him apart. Oversized and bulbous, housing a brain of incredible power. As he stepped out into the warm light, Zarthax felt the familiar ache in his chest. Loneliness was his constant companion now. He remembered the stories his parents told him of a time when Nexus 7 was full of life, when his people were respected for their incredible mental abilities. Why did they abandon us? He whispered to the wind, knowing no answer would come. The Nexians had once been celebrated throughout the galaxy for their psychic powers and deep empathy. They could read minds, move objects with thought alone, and even influence the emotions of others. But as the centuries passed, the other races grew to fear the Nexians' abilities. They saw them as a threat, a race that could potentially control the minds of others. Zarthax walked slowly across the barren field, his feet barely leaving imprints in the soft soil. He approached a cliff edge and looked out at the vast emptiness before him. In the distance, he could see the ruins of what was once a great city, tall spires now crumbling, streets overgrown with strange, alien vegetation. He closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, searching for any sign of life. As always, he found nothing but the faint whispers of small creatures hiding in the shadows. The isolation was crushing. Suddenly, a memory flashed in his mind. The day the last ship left Nexus 7. He had been just a child then, clinging to his mother's hand as they watched their people evacuate. The Galactic Council had declared the Nexians too dangerous to be allowed to freely interact with other races. They were given a choice: permanent quarantine on their home planet or exile to the farthest reaches of unknown space. Most chose exile, hoping to find a new home among the stars. But Zarthax's parents had refused to leave. They believed that one day the galaxy would remember the good the Nexians had done and welcome them back. That day never came. Year after year, Zarthax watched his parents grow old and frail. They taught him everything they knew: how to control his powers, the history of their people, and the wonders of the universe they were no longer allowed to explore. And then, one by one, they faded away, leaving him alone on a planet meant for millions. Zarthax opened his eyes, pushing the painful memories aside. He had work to do. Even though he was alone, he still maintained the ancient libraries and laboratories his people had left behind. Knowledge was the greatest treasure of the Nexians, and he was determined to preserve it. As he made his way back to the underground complex, Zarthax felt a strange tingling at the base of his skull. He stopped, his large eyes widening in surprise. It had been so long since he'd felt anything like this, a presence at the very edge of his psychic range. He reached out with his mind, straining to make sense of the faint signal. It wasn't Nexian. That much was clear. It felt alien, different from anything he'd sensed before. For the first time in years, Zarthax felt a flicker of hope. Could it be that someone had finally come to Nexus 7, and the galaxy remembered them at last? But as quickly as it had appeared, the presence vanished. Zarthax stood frozen, unsure if he had imagined the whole thing. After a few moments, he shook his head and continued walking. It was probably just a glitch in the planet's old defense systems, he told himself. Nothing to get excited about. Yet as he descended into the cool darkness of his underground home, Zarthax couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The air felt charged with possibility, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Little did he know that high above Nexus 7, A ship was about to change the course of his lonely existence forever. The last of the Nexians was about to embark on an adventure that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of strength, compassion, and the true meaning of power. The peaceful quiet of Nexus 7 was shattered by a deafening roar. Zarthax rushed out of his underground home, his four arms flailing in surprise. His large eyes widened as he saw a trail of smoke cutting across the sky. Something was falling, and it was falling fast. With a thunderous crash, the object slammed into the ground several miles away. The impact shook the earth, sending clouds of dust billowing into the air. Zarthax stood frozen, his mind racing. After centuries of solitude, something new had come to his world. Curiosity overcame his fear. Using his psychic abilities, Zarthax lifted himself off the ground and glided swiftly towards the crash site. As he approached, he saw it wasn't a meteor or space debris. It was a ship, sleek and silver, unlike any he had ever seen in the old Nexian records. The ship had carved a deep furrow in the earth. Pieces of metal were scattered everywhere, still smoking from the heat of entry. Zarthax landed softly at the edge of the crater and peered inside. Suddenly, a hatch on the side of the ship burst open. Zarthax quickly hid behind a large rock, his heart pounding. He watched as strange creatures emerged from the ship, coughing and stumbling. They were Bictal, with 2 arms and round heads, topped with various colors of fur. Their skin ranged from pale to dark, and they wore matching blue uniforms. Zarthax had never seen anything like them before. "Is everyone all right?" A female voice called out. A figure stepped forward, clearly the leader. She had short black hair and carried herself with authority. "Yes, Captain Chen," another replied. "But the ship's in bad shape. We're stranded." Captain Sarah Chen surveyed the barren landscape of Nexus 7. "Where the hell are we?" she muttered. Zarthax couldn't contain his excitement any longer. These were visitors, real, living beings from another world. He stepped out from behind the rock, raising all 4 of his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Welcome to Nexus 7, he said, using his psychic abilities to project his thoughts. The effect was immediate. The humans spun around, their eyes wide with shock. Some reached for weapons at their hips. "Hold your fire," Captain Chen ordered, though her own hand hovered near her phaser. She addressed Zarthax directly. "Who? What are you?" Zarthax bowed slightly. "I am Zarthax, last of the Nexians. This is my home world. Please, do not be afraid. I mean you no harm." The humans exchanged bewildered looks. Captain Chen stepped forward cautiously. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the U.S. Horizon. We're explorers from a planet called Earth. Our ship was damaged by an ion storm, forcing us to crash land here." Zarthax's large eyes blinked rapidly, processing this information. "Earth. I've never heard of it. You must come from beyond the galactic rim." As they talked, the initial tension began to ease. The humans were fascinated by Zarthax's appearance and abilities, while he was overjoyed to finally have company after so long. Captain Chen explained their situation in more detail. Their long-range communications were down, and the ship needed extensive repairs before it could fly again. They needed help. Zarthax felt a surge of excitement. "I can help you," he said eagerly. "The old Nexian cities have much technology. Perhaps we can find what you need there." Some of the crew looked skeptical, but Captain Chen nodded. "We'd be grateful for any assistance, Zarthax. But first, tell us more about your people. Why are you alone here?" Zarthax's joy faded a little. "It is a long and sad story, Captain. My people were once respected throughout the galaxy for our mental powers, but fear turned others against us. We were abandoned, quarantined on our own world." The humans listened in astonishment as Zarthax shared his story. Captain Chen's expression softened with each word. "That's terrible," she said when he finished. "No one should be treated that way because they're different." Zarthax felt a warmth in his chest. For the first time in ages, someone understood. These humans, strange as they were, showed him kindness. "Come," he said, gesturing towards the horizon. "Let me show you my home. Together, we'll find a way to repair your ship." As the group set off across the barren plains of Nexus 7, neither the humans nor Zarthax realized that this chance encounter would soon change the fate of the entire galaxy. A new chapter in history had begun, one of friendship, understanding, and the unexpected strength found in those once thought weak. Days turned into weeks as the crew of the U.S. Horizon worked tirelessly to repair their ship. Zarthax proved to be an invaluable ally, guiding them through the abandoned Nexian cities and helping them understand the advanced technology left behind by his people. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the edge of a crumbling tower, looking out over the alien landscape. Beside her, Zarthax floated gently, his forearms crossed in a pose she had come to recognize as thoughtful. "Your world is beautiful, Zarthax," she said softly. "I can't imagine how lonely it must have been for you all these years." Zarthax's large eyes blinked slowly. "It was difficult," he admitted, "but your arrival has brought new life to Nexus 7. For the first time in centuries, I feel hope." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by a shout from below. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the ship's engineer, came running towards them, his face pale with worry. "Captain, we've picked up something on the long-range sensors," he gasped. "You need to see this." Back at the crash site, the crew had set up a makeshift command center. As Chen and Zarthax entered, they saw the worried faces of the crew gathered around a flickering holographic display. "What am I looking at, Lieutenant?" Chen asked, her voice tense. Rodriguez pointed to a cluster of red dots moving steadily across the star map. "These appeared at the edge of the system about an hour ago. They're ships, Captain, a lot of them. And they're heading straight for Nexus 7. Zarthax moved closer to the display, his eyes widening in recognition. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." Chen turned to him. "Zarthax, do you know who they are?" The Nexian's voice was filled with dread as he spoke. "They are the Drakari Dominion, the brutal empire that preys on weak and abandoned worlds. They must have detected your ship's crash and come to investigate." The crew exchanged worried glances. Chen's jaw set in determination. "Tell us everything you know about them, Zarthax." As Zarthax began to explain, the holographic display zoomed in on one of the approaching ships. It was massive, easily dwarfing the horizon. Its hull was dark and covered in sharp, angular protrusions that made it look like a predator ready to strike. "The Drakari are conquerors," Zarthax said, his voice trembling slightly. "They seek out planets they deem weak or unprotected. They strip them of resources, enslave the population, and move on. My people knew of them, but we were too strong for them to attack. Now," Chen finished his thought, "now they think Nexus 7 is defenseless." The command center erupted in a flurry of activity. Officers rushed to the battle stations, preparing for the worst. Chen turned to her first officer. "How long until they reach us?" "At their current speed, less than 48 hours, Captain," he replied grimly. Chen nodded, her mind racing. "We need to contact Earth, warn them about what's coming." "Rodriguez, can we get a message out?" The engineer shook his head. "The communication array is still down. We'd need a massive power boost to punch a signal through." All eyes turned to Zarthax. The Nexian had been quiet, lost in thought. Suddenly, his eyes lit up with an idea. "There might be a way," he said. "In the old capital, there's a psychic amplifier. It was used to boost our mental powers for long-range communication. If we can activate it, I might be able to send a message to your people." Hope flickered across Chen's face. That could work. But Zarthax, using that device, would it be dangerous for you? Zarthax smiled sadly. "Yes, but the fate of my world, and perhaps your people, is at stake. I'm willing to take the risk." Chen clasped Zarthax's shoulder, a gesture of companionship that had become natural over the past weeks. "We'll find another way." I won't let you sacrifice yourself." As they debated their options, the holographic display blinked ominously. The Drakari fleet had picked up speed. They now had less than 36 hours before the invasion force arrived. Chen looked around at her crew, then at Zarthax. Despite the fear in their eyes, she saw determination and courage. "All right, people. We've got a planet to defend and a message to send. Let's get to work." As the command center burst into action, Chen couldn't help but wonder, would Earth receive their warning in time? And even if they did, could they stand against the might of the Drakari Dominion? The next 36 hours would determine the fate of not just Nexus 7, but potentially the entire galaxy. The ancient Nexian capital loomed before them, its once gleaming towers now dull and crumbling. Captain Sarah Chen led a small team through the empty streets, with Zarthax floating beside her. Time was running out. The Drakari fleet would arrive in less than a day. "Are you sure about this, Zarthax?" Chen asked, her voice laced with concern. "Using the psychic amplifier could be dangerous for you." The Nexian's large eyes blinked slowly. "We have no choice, Captain. It's the only way to contact your people in time." As they approached the central building, a massive structure that seemed to touch the clouds, Chen's communicator crackled to life. "Captain, we've got a problem." It was Lieutenant Rodriguez back at the crash site. "Our long-range sensors just picked up a new signal. It's an Earth fleet." Chen's eyes widened in surprise. "Earth fleet? How is that possible?" "Unknown, Captain," Rodriguez replied. "But they'll be here in about 2 hours. That's the good news. The bad news is they're not combat ready. They look like a scientific expedition." Chen's heart sank. A scientific fleet wouldn't stand a chance against the Drakari war machines. They needed a plan, and fast. Zarthax, who had been listening intently, suddenly perked up. "Captain, I have an idea. Follow me." The Nexian led them deep into the heart of the ancient building. They passed through halls filled with strange machines, their purposes long forgotten. Finally, they reached a circular room dominated by a massive crystal structure. "This is the core," Zarthax explained. "It powered all of Nexian technology. If we can reactivate it, we might have a chance against the Drakari." Chen looked skeptical. "How?" "We don't have time to learn how to use your technology." Zarthax's eyes twinkled with excitement. "We don't need to. The core responds to thought. My people used it to amplify our natural abilities. But with your human ingenuity and my psychic powers, we might be able to do something unprecedented." Understanding dawned on Chen's face. A joint operation, human and Nexian working together. "Exactly," Zarthax nodded. "Your tactical knowledge combined with my mental abilities. We could create defenses the Drakari have never seen before." Chen didn't hesitate. "Let's do it. What do you need from us?" The next hour was a flurry of activity. As Zarthax worked to reactivate the core, Chen's crew set up a makeshift command center in the ancient Nexian building. They linked their systems to the core, creating a hybrid of human and Nexian technology. Just as they finished, Rodriguez's voice came through again. "Captain, the Earth fleet has arrived. And you're not going to believe this. It's led by Admiral Zhao." Chen couldn't believe her ears. Admiral Zhao was a legend in Earth's space fleet. If anyone could help them face the Drakari, it was him. Within minutes, a holographic image of Admiral Zhao flickered to life in the command center. His weathered face looked grave as Chen quickly explained the situation. "A Nexian and human alliance," Zhao mused, stroking his beard. "In all my years of space exploration, I never thought I'd see the day. But if what you're saying about these Drakari is true, we'll need every advantage we can get." Chen nodded. "Sir, with your fleet, our ship, and Zarthax's technology, we might have a fighting chance." Zhao's eyes narrowed. "It's a long shot, Captain, but it's the only shot we've got. What's the plan?" As Chen began to outline their strategy, Zarthax felt a wave of emotion wash over him. For centuries, his people had been shunned, feared for their abilities. Now those same abilities might be the key to saving not just Nexus 7, but perhaps the entire sector from Drakari domination. The unlikely alliance of humans and the last Nexians stood ready. In the distance, the first signs of the Drakari fleet began to appear in the sky. The battle for Nexus 7 was about to begin, and with it, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. As Zarthax connected his mind to the core, he felt the combined strength of human determination and Nexian power flow through him. For the first time in his long, lonely existence, he wasn't alone. And together, they just might be strong enough to face the coming storm. The sky above Nexus 7 erupted in flashes of light as the Drakari fleet emerged from hyperspace. Their ships, dark and menacing, filled the horizon. On the ground, Captain Sarah Chen, Admiral Zhao, and Zarthax watched from the ancient Nexian command center, their faces grim but determined. "They're here," Chen said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her stomach. Admiral Zhao nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "All ships, battle positions, remember your training. We may be outnumbered, but we're not outmatched." Zarthax floated silently, his four arms moving in complex patterns as he interfaced with the Nexian core. Through it, he could sense every ship, every weapon, every mind in the coming battle. The Drakari wasted no time. Their lead ships opened fire, raining energy blasts down on the planet's surface. But instead of impacting, the blasts dissipated against an invisible shield. "It's working," Chen exclaimed. "Zarthax's psychic shield is holding." The Drakari paused, clearly surprised by this unexpected defense. It was all the opening the Earth fleet needed. "All ships, engage," Admiral Zhao commanded. The human vessels surged forward, their weapons blazing. What the Earth ships lacked in size, they made up for in agility. They darted between the massive Drakari cruisers, landing precise hits on vulnerable spots. Zarthax, connected to the core, fed them real-time information on Drakari weak points. But the Drakari were not easily defeated. They quickly regrouped, their superior numbers allowing them to press the attack from multiple angles. Several Earth ships took heavy damage, forced to retreat behind Zarthax's psychic shield. On the ground, Chen coordinated the planet-based defenses. Ancient Nexian weapons, reactivated and manned by her crew, fired bursts of energy into the sky, adding to the chaos of the space battle. "Captain," one of her officers called out, "Drakari dropships incoming. They're trying to land ground forces." Chen gritted her teeth. This was the moment they had feared. If the Drakari established a foothold on Nexus 7, the battle would be all but lost. "Zarthax," she called out, "can you extend the shield to stop their landing?" The Nexian's eyes were closed in deep concentration. I can try, but it will weaken our defenses in space." Admiral Zhao's hologram flickered. "Do it. We'll handle things up here." Zarthax nodded and focused his mind. The psychic shield shimmered, expanding to cover more of the planet's surface. The first wave of Drakari dropships slammed into it, exploding in brilliant fireballs. But the effort was taking its toll. Sweat beaded on Zarthax's pale skin, and his floating form trembled with exertion. In space, the battle raged on. With the psychic shield weakened, more Drakari fire was getting through. Earth ships were taking heavy damage now. "We can't hold out much longer," Admiral Zhao reported, his voice tight with tension. Chen looked at Zarthax, worry etched on her face. The Nexian was pushing himself to the limit, his mind stretched between defending the planet and aiding the space battle. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the command center. Multiple breaches. An officer shouted, "Drakari forces have landed in sectors 3, 7, and 9. Chen's heart sank. Despite their best efforts, the enemy had gained a foothold. She turned to her team, determination burning in her eyes. "This is it, people. We hold the line here." For Earth, for Nexus 7, for the entire galaxy. As her crew rushed to battle stations, Chen spared one last glance at Zarthax. The last Nexian, once thought weak and useless by the galaxy, now stood as their final hope. Zarthax sensed her gaze and opened his eyes briefly. Despite the strain, he managed a small smile. "Together," he said softly. Chen nodded, drawing her weapon. "Together," she echoed. Outside, the sky burned with the fury of battle. On the ground, the first sounds of Drakari war cries could be heard. The fate of Nexus 7, and perhaps the galaxy, would be decided in the next few hours. As Chen led her team out to face the Drakari ground forces, one thought echoed in her mind. In the darkest hour, strength could be found in the most unexpected places. And sometimes, those the galaxy called weak could prove to be the strongest of all. The ground shook with explosions as Captain Sarah Chen led her team through the ruins of the ancient Nexian city. Drakari forces had breached their defenses and were pushing towards the command center. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of weapons fire. "Hold the line," Chen shouted, firing her energy rifle at an advancing group of Drakari soldiers. Their armor was tough, but it couldn't withstand direct hits from Earth weapons. Back in the command center, Zarthax floated in front of the Nexian core, his mind stretched to its limits. Through the psychic link, he could feel the fear and determination of every human fighting on the surface and in space, but he could also sense something else, a faint energy signature coming from deep within the planet. "Captain," he called out through their communication link, his voice trained. "There's something beneath the city. An ancient power source. If we can reach it, we might be able to turn the tide." Chen ducked behind a fallen pillar as Drakari fire rained around her. "Understood, Zarthax. But we're pinned down here. We need a miracle." As if in answer to her words, the sky lit up with a brilliant flash. A massive Drakari battleship, hit by concentrated fire from the Earth fleet, began to fall from the sky. Admiral Zhou's voice crackled over the comm. "We've taken out their flagship, but we've got heavy casualties. Whatever you're planning down there, do it fast." Chen saw her opportunity. "All units, push forward. Use the chaos to break through their lines." With renewed vigor, the human forces surged forward. Chen led the charge, her mind racing. They needed to find that power source, but where? Suddenly, she remembered something Zarthax had told her about Nexian architecture. "The central spire," she muttered. "It's always the central spire." "Team Alpha with me," she commanded. "We're heading for the tallest building in the city." As they fought their way through the streets, Chen couldn't help but marvel at the unlikely alliance they had formed. Humans and a Nexian, fighting side by side against a common enemy. The galaxy had called Zarthax's people weak, but their strength was proving invaluable. Finally, they reached the base of the central spire. It was an immense structure, reaching high into the smoke-filled sky. But there was no obvious entrance. "Zarthax," Chen called out, "we're here, but we can't find a way in." Back in the command center, Zarthax's eyes snapped open. "The entrance is hidden, Captain. It responds to Nexian mental signatures. I can guide you, but I'll have to drop the psychic shields to do it." Chen hesitated. Dropping the shields meant leaving themselves exposed to the full might of the Drakari fleet, but they were out of options. "Do it," she ordered. The moment the shields dropped, the Drakari pressed their advantage. Energy blasts rained down from the sky, impacting all around Chen and her team. But amidst the chaos, a section of the spire's base shimmered and disappeared, revealing the hidden entrance. "Go, go, go," Chen shouted, ushering her team inside. As the last soldier entered, the entrance sealed behind them. Inside, they found themselves in a vast chamber filled with pulsing, crystal-like structures. At the center was a glowing orb that seemed to radiate pure energy. "The heart of Nexus," Zarthax's voice whispered in their minds. "An artifact of immense power, created by my ancestors. With it, we can amplify our abilities beyond anything the Drakari can withstand. Chen approached the orb cautiously. How do we activate it? Touch it, Captain, Zarthax instructed. Your human spirit, combined with my Nexian abilities, should be enough to awaken its power. Taking a deep breath, Chen reached out and placed her hand on the orb. Instantly, she felt a surge of energy course through her body. In her mind, she could see Zarthax, no longer in the command center but somehow here with her, his 4 arms outstretched. Together, their minds merged with the ancient Nexian technology. Power beyond imagination flowed through them. Outside, the battle came to a sudden halt as a blinding light engulfed Nexus 7. The Drakari ships found themselves unable to move, caught in a web of psychic energy. On the ground, their soldiers froze in place, weapons falling from limp hands. In orbit, Admiral Zhao watched in awe as the light spread across the planet. What's happening down there? He wondered aloud. As the light faded, a singular message, carried on waves of thought, echoed across the battlefield. Nexus 7 is under our protection. Leave now or face the combined might of humanity and the Nexian legacy. The tide had turned. The unlikely alliance of the weak Nexian and the humans had done the impossible. Now, as the Drakari fleet began a hasty retreat, the true battle was only beginning. The battle to forge a new future for both their peoples in a galaxy that would soon learn the true meaning of strength. The twin suns of Nexus 7 rose over a changed world. The scars of battle were everywhere. Crashed ships, crumbling buildings, and the remnants of the great psychic surge that had turned the tide. But amidst the destruction, there was hope. Captain Sarah Chen stood atop the central spire, looking out over the landscape. Beside her floated Zarthax, the last Nexian, his large eyes reflecting the dawn light. "We did it," Chen said softly, still hardly believing it herself. Zarthax nodded, a gentle smile on his alien features. "Together, we achieved what neither of us could have done alone." Behind them, Admiral Zhao approached, his uniform dusty from the previous day's battle. "The last of the Drakari fleet has left the system," he reported. "It seems our message was received loud and clear." Chen turned to face him. "And Earth, have you made contact?" Zhao's weathered face broke into a rare smile. "Yes, they're sending a diplomatic envoy as we speak. It seems our little adventure here has caught the attention of the entire human government." As if on cue, a sleek ship appeared in the sky, descending towards the makeshift landing pad they had cleared. It bore the insignia of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. "Well," Chen said, straightening her uniform, "I suppose it's time to face the music." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Earth diplomats, led by Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, listened in awe as Chen, Zhao, and Zarthax recounted the events of the past few days. The alliance between humans and a Nexian, the battle against the Drakari, and the awakening of the ancient Nexian power. It all seemed like something out of a science fiction story. "This changes everything," Ambassador Rodriguez said, her eyes wide. "The galactic community has ignored this sector for centuries, believing the Nexians to be extinct or irrelevant. But now," Zarthax spoke up, his voice gentle but firm. "Now, they will have to recognize that strength comes in many forms. My people were shunned because we were different, because our power was not understood. But together with humanity, we have shown what true strength is." The ambassador nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed, and Earth stands ready to formalize this alliance. Zarthax, as the last of your kind, would you be willing to act as ambassador for Nexus 7? Zarthax blinked in surprise. I would be honored, but I am just one being. How can I represent an entire world?" Chen stepped forward, placing a hand on Zarthax's shoulder. "You won't be alone. If Earth agrees, I volunteer to stay here as a liaison. Together, we can bridge our two cultures." Admiral Zhao nodded approvingly. A fine idea, Captain. And I believe Earth would be wise to establish a permanent base here. The Drakari may be gone for now, but there are other threats out there. As the discussions continued, plans began to take shape. Earth would send scientists and engineers to study and help restore Nexian technology. In return, Zarthax would share his people's knowledge and abilities. The heart of Nexus, the powerful artifact that had saved them all, would be studied carefully, its power used to protect rather than conquer. As the day drew to a close, Chen found herself once again atop the central spire with Zarthax. The setting suns painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. "So," Chen said, ready to help reshape the galaxy. Zarthax's eyes twinkled with amusement. "It will not be easy. There will be those who fear this alliance, who do not understand." Chen nodded. "True, but we faced impossible odds before and won. As long as we stand together, I believe we can accomplish anything." As they watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, both human and Nexian felt a sense of hope and possibility. The galaxy had once shunned the Nexians, calling them weak. But now, a new era was dawning, one where the combined strengths of humanity and the Nexian legacy would forge a path to a brighter future. The last light of day glinted off a piece of Drakari wreckage in the distance, a reminder of the battle they had won. But for Chen and Zarthax, it was also a promise of the challenges and adventures that lay ahead. Together, they would show the galaxy the true meaning of strength, unity, and the power of an unlikely friendship.